You know that feeling, don't you? That quiet moment when it hits you that you're the only one trying. You're always the one sending the first text, making all the plans, checking in, and then one day, you just stop. So let's really dive into why that happens.
I mean, this really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? It's not that you stopped caring, no. It's that caring started to hurt. That's the key. It's that quiet, heavy weight of putting in all the effort and getting nothing back, a feeling so many of us know all too well.
So why do some of us just stop? What is really going on here? Because it's not some simple decision you just make one morning. It's a really deep, complex psychological thing. Today we're going to unpack the 5 big reasons behind this quiet retreat. Okay, so let's start with our first reason. And this is something I think a lot of us feel but can never quite put our finger on. If you've ever been that person, the one everyone leans on, the one holding it all together for everyone else, then you need to hear this. Because that feeling of exhaustion, it's not just in your head, it's actually in your biology.
Yeah, so there's a psychologist, Shelley Taylor from UCLA, and she actually gave this a name. She called it the Tend-and-befriend response. And what that means is, for some of us, when things get stressful, our instinct isn't fight or flight, it's to take care of other people. It's not a choice, it's literally hardwired into us. It's not a flaw, it's just how we're built.
But, and this is the really crucial part, that system needs fuel. It's designed to run on reciprocity, on give and take. So when you just keep giving and giving and giving, and nobody's giving anything back, well, the system crashes. It just runs out of gas. So what you're feeling, it is not weakness, it's not laziness, it is straight up biological burnout.
So we've got this burnout, right? But it's not just some vague emotional feeling. It actually triggers something very real, something physical, inside your brain. And this is where we can throw that idea of being oversensitive right out the window. Because what the science shows is that this is about how your brain is literally wired to process pain. Okay, get this. Neuroscientists did this study where they had people play a simple online game. And then they had the other players start excluding one person. And you know what they found? The person's brain lit up in the exact same area that lights up when you feel physical pain. I mean, let that sink in. To your brain, a broken connection feels just like a broken bone.
And yeah, there's a name for this spot in your brain. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex. And thanks to some amazing research from people like Naomi Eisenberger, again at UCLA, we now know for a fact that being ignored or rejected, it isn't something you just get over. Your brain is processing it as a genuine, literal injury.
So, when you pulled back, when you finally stopped reaching out, that wasn't you being dramatic or overreacting, not at all. That was a profound act of self-preservation. Your brain was literally shielding you from what it was experiencing as real, measurable damage. Okay, so that leads to the next logical question, right? Where did our brains even learn that connection could be so dangerous? Well, for that answer, we often have to look at our earliest experiences. This isn't really about avoiding people now, it's about a protective system that was built a long, long time ago. The psychiatrist John Bowlby called this an avoidant attachment style. And that name can be a little misleading. It doesn't mean you don't want connection. In fact, it's often the opposite. It just means that somewhere, deep in your past, your brain learns that reaching out, being vulnerable, was associated with the risk of getting hurt or let down.
And look, this kind of blueprint isn't built overnight. It gets drawn over years. Maybe it starts when you're 7, and you learn that needing someone just ends in disappointment. Then by 12, that lesson solidifies into silence equals safety. And there was this incredible 30-year study that confirmed exactly this. These early lessons create this kind of unconscious roadmap that we follow in all our relationships later on.
So what does that all boil down to? It means that for so many of us, stopping isn't a conscious choice we're making today. It's more like the final result of a lesson that's been learned and reinforced for a whole lifetime. You didn't really choose silence. You were trained to believe it was the only safe option.
And this internal programming, this blueprint, it can mess with something even more basic, our ability to even talk about what we're feeling. You know that moment when someone asks, hey, what's wrong? And you say, nothing. It might not actually be a lie. It might be that you've hit a total dead end, linguistically speaking.
Yep, there's even a clinical term for this. It's called alexithymia. It comes from Greek, and it literally means no words for emotions. And let's be clear, it's not that you don't feel, oh no, you probably feel everything, maybe more intensely than others, but there's this disconnect, a gap between the feeling itself and the words you need to describe it.
And you can see how this creates just a devastating cycle, right? I mean, if you can't even name what you're feeling, the loneliness, the hurt, the disappointment, how on earth are you supposed to ask for what you need? You can't. So eventually, you just stop trying. You go silent, because the words just aren't there. Okay, so we've talked about the biology, the brain science, the childhood programming, but there's another layer here. Because sometimes the silence stops being just a symptom of the past, and it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a conscious, really powerful choice about your future. And this is a really important question, so I want you to actually think about it for a second. When you go quiet, when you withdraw, does it feel like a choice you're making, or does it feel more like a cage you're trapped in? Because it turns out your nervous system has two totally different ways of doing silence.
See, a conscious pause feels pretty calm. It feels clear. It feels like you are in the driver's seat. You're choosing to protect your energy. But an unconscious shutdown, that feels numb, disconnected, foggy. You didn't choose it. Your body's survival mode chose it for you. One is an act of strength. The other is a sign that maybe you need some support.
So what makes that conscious pause so powerful? Well, it all comes down to what psychologists call our three core human needs. We all have them. Autonomy, the need to feel in control of our lives. Competence, feeling like we're good at what we do. And relatedness, that feeling of connection. To really thrive, we got to have all three.
Okay, now this next part is the big reframe. This is huge. Most people think that when you stop reaching out, you've given up on that third need, relatedness, that you've abandoned connection. But that's not what's really happening. You didn't abandon connection. You reclaimed autonomy. You reclaimed your right to control your own life and to choose who gets your energy. All right, so let's bring this all home. When you look at the full picture, the biology of burnout, the neuroscience of pain, that childhood blueprint, and then this final conscious choice, you start to see that this act of stopping, it's not an ending at all. It's actually a profound evolution.
You didn't stop because you suddenly became cold or uncaring. You stopped because your nervous system kept the score. It remembered every single one-sided text, every canceled plan. You just stopped pretending that it didn't hurt anymore. So this isn't about pushing other people away. It's about finally pulling yourself closer.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Is this silence really the end of connection, or is it maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a better one? Maybe letting go of the relationships that drain you isn't the end of the story at all. Maybe it's just the quiet space you need before you can build the ones that actually fill you up.